In this video, we're going to take a look at the upcoming election on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, which could determine the ideological balance. The election is April 1st, and both sides are spending huge to have an advantage in this key swing state's top court. So we'll glance at the candidates, the court, the state of the race, and the potential outlook. So let's get into it. The headline here is Wisconsin clerks see surge of early in-person voting ahead of April Supreme Court election. And then down here it says more than twice as many Wisconsinites have cast in-person absentee ballots on the first day of early voting. That's compared to the same period 2 years ago. So I'm not going to read this whole article, but as always, all these links will be down below in the description. So for a lot of this, we're going to use Ballotpedia. And there is a ton of information on here. This pretty much sums it all up. But if you're looking for a quick summary, there are 7 justices on this court, and they're technically nonpartisan, but 4 of them are considered on the court's liberal wing and 3 of them on the conservative wing. These are 10-year terms, and the justice retiring this time is Ann Walsh Bradley. She's considered on the liberal side. So that means the Democrats are going to want to hold this seat, Republicans looking to flip it and regain control of the court. Conservatives had control over it up until a couple of years ago. Then it became a 4-3 liberal majority. So now there's yet another opportunity for a change in direction. So I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. But again, there's more information here on Ballotpedia than I could ever cover in this video. So now with a little bit of the overview out of the way, let's get down into the candidates. We've got 2 of them. Again, technically nonpartisan. We've got Susan Crawford. She's going to be backed by Democrats, and Brad Schimel is going to be backed by the Republicans. Now, Crawford currently sits on a county circuit court, and Brad Schimel actually held a significant office statewide. He was the Attorney General for Wisconsin from 2015 to 19. He lost re-election in 18. And then down here we've got a few of the key dates. The only one you really want to take note of here is April 1st. That's the day of the election. Now let's go down here and take a quick glance here at the composition of the state Supreme Court. Now Ballotpedia has all 7 justices here, and they've got the red and the blue dots next to them to indicate what their ideological slant is. So again, you can see 3 are in red and 4 are in blue. Now that doesn't necessarily mean on every case there's going to be 4 of the liberals against 3 of the conservatives. There's always a chance there could be different voting blocks depending on the issue. But one justice to take note of here is going to be Brian Hagedorn. He's considered part of the conservative bloc. However, if we take a look at this, he's also considered a key swing vote. There's been several times over the years, even on some high-profile cases, where he's joined the court's liberal bloc. That was when the conservatives technically had control. So if you're a Republican, you're looking for some loyalty on the court, this justice is not going to give you that. He's been unpredictable and given the liberals more wins than you might think, just based on the court's composition at the time. So even if conservatives regain control of this court, Hagedorn here might also still be a key swing vote and might not deliver the ruling that they're hoping. So you can read more about Hagedorn here if you'd like. There is some interesting stuff here about how he's ruled on some key cases. So with that said, we can head over to Wikipedia. Now here's the page for this election, and it has a lot of the same stuff we covered. But if we go down here, they talk about the advertising. We're going to get to that in just a minute. But then when it comes to specific issues for this race, a lot of it I'm sure you could already predict. They mention Elon Musk here, and I'm sure Democrats are going to try to make him a focal point. He might be the least popular thing about the Trump administration, so Dems are going to want to highlight it. But other than that, these justices are going to try to stake out typical positions for someone trying to run for a Supreme Court seat. They're not going to come out and say how they're going to rule on most of these issues, and they're going to try to not exactly tip their hand on a lot of their views. Of course, you could go back and look at Crawford's history serving on the circuit court, and you can look at Brad Schimel, who ran as a Republican and won and then lost as Attorney General. Now after that, we've got some endorsements here, so you can see who everybody is backing. Crawford has a good chunk of unions, especially teachers unions. They both have the backing of one of Wisconsin's U.S. senators. Crawford has Tammy Baldwin, and Schimel has Ron Johnson. Schimel also has some backing from police and fire unions. It looks like Tim Walz from neighboring Minnesota has weighed in on this race, and he's going to be backing Crawford. But Brad Schimel has the backing of Donald Trump. That endorsement is likely to have the most weight. This is a key swing state. It's gone back and forth. Trump narrowly carried this state in 24. Without his voters energized for Schimel, he's not going to be able to win this race. So after that, we do have one debate here. This was on March 12th, and there's a YouTube link here if you want to take a look at it. I did watch most of this race, and again, it's pretty much what you'd expect. They both want to tie each other to unpopular political figures, and they both want to highlight each other's outside donations. Now, we do have a little bit of polling here. I'm not sure how great these polls pollsters are going to be, but these all do seem to have a Republican backing. But in these polls, Susan Crawford generally seems to be leading over Brad Schimel. She's not at 50%, but she's looking a little bit better there than Schimel. But of course, we've still got some time left. Next, we can go back to the spending in this race. And this says this election is headed for a record-smashing spending of $100 million. And that's going to be double what they spent a couple of years ago. Now, a lot of the spending is going to be from outside groups, and it's never really going to be fun to see that. Ideally, all the money would be local, and this race would not be nationalized. But national politics are not everything. A lot of times it comes down to the state, the county, or the local level. And a state Supreme Court race with this much on the line is definitely going to get attention from both sides, especially after they just had a heated election in this state back in November. A lot of upcoming rulings could go one way or the other depending on who wins this race. The notable one I'm going to point out is going to be on redistricting. The court already threw out the maps in the state legislature. They went from being in the Republicans' favor to being much more competitive. So Dems made some gains in the last election in the legislature, but the congressional maps in the U.S. House are still the same. Those could be struck down in the future, thereby giving Dems another boost. So a lot's on the line here, and this money goes to reflect that. Now let's look at some of the recent results in these state Supreme Court races. The last one was back in 23, and that was won by the Liberal candidate by about 11 points. That's what flipped the court from a 4-3 conservative majority to 4-3 Liberal. It was actually a 5-2 conservative majority back until 2020. In that race again, the Liberal candidate won by double digits, 55.2. Now the last time a conservative candidate won was back in 2019. That was going to be Brian Hagedorn, and that was an extremely tight race. It won only by about a half a point with 50.2. That was a huge pickup there for the conservatives. Now the year that Hagedorn won was just after the blue wave of 2018, where Democrats had a lot of pickups in the U.S. House and for governor. I would have thought that Hagedorn lost, given that blue wave still seemed to be going on at the time. So that was pretty close, but before that in 2018, again the Liberal candidate winning by about 11 points. And it was surprisingly pretty much uncontested here in 2017 when the conservative Annette Ziegler won another term. So you could see the rest of the results here going back to 2005. Liberals did have control of the court up until 2008. That's when Republicans flipped it, and they held control for about 15 years until 2023. Down here there's another graph if you want a better way to visualize some of this data. And even further down, Ballotpedia goes into some more detail about some of these recent elections. There's a lot of great information on here if you're more interested in the details. So again, when the Liberal candidate wins, it's usually by double digits. If the Republican is going to pull it off, it looks like it's by a much narrower margin of about a half a point over the past 5 or 6 years. Well, now we'll look just a little bit more at the last election here in 2023. Again, the Liberal candidate here winning by 11 points, 55.4. You can take a look at the county map here, and that's going to be similar to how it looks for other statewide offices or for president. But the thing to remember about this race is this is coming during the spring after the Supreme Court decision on abortion, the Dobbs decision. That's what energized Democrats nationally. And during the midterms in 22, they did better than expected. A lot of the attention did turn to state courts, and in this purple state, they came out. Conservatives stayed home. That's what gave Dems the flip and the pickup here. We saw it in other courts around the country. That issue was motivating for the Dems. Now, this was a couple of years ago. It might have worn off since then. However, Trump is in the White House now. Dems took a brutal loss in the election, including in Wisconsin. They might not be satisfied with the way things are going now, and they might want to turn out in this election. And based on the early ballot data, it does sound like the Dems are a little bit ahead. It might continue even on election day, or it might not. But that's where that Trump endorsement for Schimel is going to be important. There's going to be some voters in this state that are going to be motivated to turn out purely for Donald Trump. Given Trump's not on the ballot, that could cost Schimel this seat. The little bit of polling does favor Crawford, so my best guess is she's going to be a little bit favored. But we also saw Brian Hagedorn pull off a win in 2019 when it looked like Democrats were still going to have momentum. And it's a spring off-year election, turnout is going to be unpredictable. So maybe Crawford wins comfortably, maybe it's closer, maybe Schimmel's able to pull it out. We're going to find out on April 1st. Now real quick here at the end, there's also 2 other elections happening in Wisconsin on April 1st. The first one here is going to be the Superintendent of Public Instruction. That's another statewide race, both of the candidates are technically nonpartisan. Jill Underly is running for re-election. She's going to be backed by the Liberals, and Brittany Kinzer is going to be backed by the Conservatives. We're not going to really go into this one, but that's another big-time race happening in this state. And finally, we've got a ballot measure. This is about voter ID. This kind of issue has come up in different forms over the years, but there's yet another opportunity to vote on it on April 1st. A yes is going to support amending the state constitution to require a valid photo ID and allow the state legislature to define what qualifies as a valid photo ID and provide exceptions to the requirement. A no is going to oppose adding a valid photo ID requirement for voting to the Wisconsin Constitution. That one seems like it would be much more likely to pass. But that's it. That's a quick overview of what's going on in Wisconsin on April 1st. So let me know in the comments, what do you think is going to happen in this Supreme Court election? Do you think Crawford is going to win it? Do you think Schimel could pull it out at the end? What are your thoughts about anything I covered in this video? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.